As a kid going to a synagogue, our great sport on Yontif was to get in a car and drive down to the downtown area and see which Jewish business was open. This was our big sport. We had to see who closed, who was open, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we drove up and down, and that's where some of these names that I've come up with, I've done some homework on. I had a lot of fun doing it, you know, to learn that we have businesses that started 1914, 1929, 1926.
What were the businesses? Look at the list, talk about some of these businesses.
Well, we have places, believe it or not, Jerry's Men's Shop on James Street North was started by their father, Unchel Sherman, 1916. And they lived above the store. And now, 3 generations later, that business is still going. And then you drive up the street and there's another menswear store there, Irving's Famous Clothiers, which started in 1915, even older than Sherman's. And that business is still going, started in 1915. Wentworth Auto Recycling, Sam Roshberg, it's now, I think, also third generation. That started in 1933. And then when I spoke to Harold about that, they brag about the fact that it didn't start in 33. The business started in 33, but Mr. Roshberg was a peddler before that with a horse and wagon. So that company's been around. I'm not very good in mathematics, but that's a long, long time ago. Another old one, the Miller Shoe Store, dates back to 1926. Mm-hmm. And that's still going. And the list just goes on and on, as I say, and we used to go and spy on them on Yontif to see who was there and who wasn't there. Another thing I remember we used to do as kids is that we would go from our synagogue. Our family were members of the Addis Israel, and we used to go to the Beth Jacob to see what the rich kids were wearing, because there was a hierarchy. You know, you had the rich kids at the Beth Jacob and the richer kids at the temple. And to us, from the lowly North End, we went to see, they were diamond socks, cashmere sweaters. This was a big deal for us. We had to go and see who had them. We didn't have them, so we wanted to see at least what they looked like. And those were some of the great things. And it goes back, you know, there's other things. Our family, for instance, in the auto wrecking business. And my father started in business in 47, April of 47, and he came out of Hamilton Auto Parts, which I did some homework on that. I couldn't believe what I came up with. 18 businesses were spawned by Hamilton Auto Parts alone. 18 auto parts businesses. I got them all listed here. And scrap dealer. Somehow or other, a major connection for business in Hamilton was through automotive. From beginning to end, new parts, used parts, scrap, all the different departments, and it just goes on and on and on. And then we got involved with other ones and came up with a big thing in those days was delis. York Street had 4 delicatessens on it, and it seemed that every family had their allegiance to one of these delis. You didn't go to them all.
Which did you go to?
We went to Boslowski's until my father got mad at Mr. Boslowski, and then we transferred to Platt's. Then he didn't get along with them, we moved to Zucker's. So wherever he was friendly with.
Who had the best pickles?
The best pickles they all had, because they were all Strubs. The best corned beef was Boslowski's, by far.
Really?
Yeah, and unfortunately he took his secret with him. He wouldn't tell anybody how to make it, and the recipe went down the drain. He wouldn't even pass it on to his kids.
How much did you pay for a sandwich, do you remember?
Very well. We used to go to the show on Saturday afternoon, and for that we paid 6 cents. We would get a dime, you got 6 cents, and the other 4 cents were for candy that you could buy at the theater from a Jewish merchant. I remember him very well, beside the Tivoli Theater, and whether you went to the Tivoli or the Granada, it didn't matter, you still bought your candy in this store beside the Tivoli with the extra 4 cents, and then you got a quarter for after the show to go to Boslowski's to get 2 corned beef sandwiches and a bottle of pop. And I remember it was a big deal when the taxes were added and went up to 27 cents. That was a terrible thing. And included in that quarter, there was pickles and pickled tomatoes on the table, free. So it was not a bad deal, not a bad deal. And it went on and on. I'm looking here at some of the stuff. We found out we had so many furriers in town, Jewish furriers, Gordon Bornstein, and where's my list? Babe Poulter was a furrier. We had all kinds of stuff. I won't find it. And then we started to get in. We were so proud in the community. We had so many Jewish lawyers and doctors. We had doctors, we had lawyers, Mr. Michnick, the 2 Schreiber brothers, Sauter, Joe Sweet, who became a judge, which was very exciting. We had furniture stores.
Any athletes? Anyone connected to sports?
Very, very few. There were a lot of great athletes in the community. We had some, one of them, there was a fellow by the name of Joe Cohn who had a tryout with the St. Louis Cardinals as a catcher way, way back. That's in the 40s. But we had some great athletes. Al Foreman, a great athlete. Benny Matchin, well, the Matchin family, all the boys were great athletes. We had the Rifle boys were all great basketball players, but they're sort of the modern age. But there were many.
Was it a fun community to grow up in? When you look back, was it a...
Well, it was a great community because we had a little bit of everything. And the community was so good and so friendly and outgoing and all. You didn't need another community. We had enough here. We didn't know we were missing anything. You know, we all came from families, most of the women, as I recall, my mother was, for instance, a fantastic cook. We never knew, you know, they didn't have anything, but we still ate like kings. I used to think my mother was the greatest food and the greatest cooker in town, but I'm paying for it now because they've got high cholesterol and this kind of problem and that kind of problem. We live too good. We didn't realize or even think that there could have been anything bad going on. We were doing all the wrong things. We ate all the fatty foods, but it was a great thing. Everything in those days evolved around the shuls. Everybody belonged to one or the other, and there was a rivalry, which I think was a good rivalry that helped build up the community because the people who belonged to this said, I can be as good as that guy, and you worked at it, and I think it was very good. The competition that it created, there was a lot of business.
Growing up, do you ever remember running into trouble with non-Jews, anti-Semitism?
Only once, and it was when we were kids, and it didn't bother me because afterwards I realized that what happened was based on ignorance, and I had a neighbor kid, 6 years old, talked to me on the street one day. He says, I don't like you because Jews killed Jesus. Well, I was in big trouble because I went home to ask my mother who Jesus was. You know, at 6 years old, I didn't have a clue. And had never come up in school yet. And my mother gave me some story, and I don't even remember what it was. But what it showed me is how ignorant people are, that the kid heard this at home. He wasn't smart enough to figure this out by himself. And I laughed at the stupidity of the whole thing, but other than a little incident like that, I never had it. It was never blatant or out in front where you could worry about walking down the street or anything. I never felt that at all, ever. It was always there. There's a feeling which still exists today. Things are no different today. They're just better actors today. They hide things better. I'm probably more pro-Jewish now than I ever was in my life. But now I let them make their noise. They're stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. That's what it is to me.
Even with the rivalry, people still came together. Is that right? Did people come together? Did people from the different shuls know one another? Was it a tight, closely knit?
No, it was closely knit that they were all Jews together, but not 100% together, because there still was, in my day, a major difference between the shuls. The shuls were different kind of people. Different kind of people. If there was ever any problem, they were all together from outside. But from within side, there was still a dislike. Maybe not a dislike, that's a too strong a word, but there wasn't the closeness that you would think there would have been. There was a difference in the people knew it, and I don't think they felt bad about it. I don't think it created a problem. But just like there is with many, many things, in my day as a kid, I used to hear all the time, oh, he's a Polak, and he's a Galicianer, and he's a this, and he's a that. And they tried maybe to make a difference, but there really was no difference. It was no big deal that I could feel, but it was there. It was always there.
Do you think that has disappeared today? That is to say,
no, it hasn't. I think it's just the same today. There is, and there will always be. There's a bit of a distinction, and I know there's a distinction because I made a major change in my life. When my wife and I got married, she's a small town person who they went to shul in Toronto on the high holidays. So when I brought her to Hamilton and took her to my shul and took her to the Addis, and I walk in and they said goodbye to her. She went to the ladies' side and I went to the men's side, and after a while she says, you know, I don't like this. It's no good. So I did something that I never thought I would ever do. We joined the temple. And actually we're still to this day members of both, full members of both. And but that was a dramatic change. You know, we went to here. I go to a shul with an organ. My father would have had would have rolled over in his grave if he knew I was there at the. In fact, they had a terrible nickname in those days. They used to call it the Deutsche Schule because they were German people who started the temple. So,
here's a question that most people wouldn't even think of asking. Cuppy is the Hebrew name, the English name. This isn't the name that you were given at birth.
No, well, what I was given at birth I couldn't defend myself from, and I needed a change. My real name was Clarence. I didn't get a middle name because they didn't know what middle names were in those days. And that came about because the only educated person that my mother knew at the time was our insurance man, who was a fellow by the name of Joe Lewis, member of the temple. And my mother went to him because she needed English advice and said, we've got this kid, what are we going to call him? And so what are you going to call him in Yiddish? Well, in Yiddish, my name was Couple, named after a grandfather. So what happened then is, okay, Joe Lewis, help us. We've got to have a name. So the choice, I understand from the stories I've heard, was either Clarence or Calvin. And as I say, if I'd had a choice, it wouldn't have been either one of those. But I ended up with Clarence, and I didn't like it, never wanted to be called it. And Cuppy, coupled, moved into Cuppy, and that's what I've been ever since.
There aren't any other people that I know who are called Cuppy. Do you know anybody?
There was one other one, and the family is still in the community. There was a Cuppy Orgel, who was Shoichet's son, maybe grandson. I think grandson. Unfortunately, he passed away, so he's not here. But the brother is still in the community. I see him on occasion. But that's how that happened. And I don't know, if you asked all my business associates who Clarence Katz was, they'd look at you like you were crazy. They wouldn't know who it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just thought that I would end by asking one other thing. I came to Hamilton in the early 1970s and was introduced to the Jewish Community Center on Delaware, near Sanford. At that time, I think that most people had chosen not to be part of it or not to use it. You must remember the Jewish Community Center when it was quite a happening place.
Well, I can get very upset when I talk about the community center. It was so good that I didn't realize how good it was until they threatened to take it away from us. And that came about, and I'll leave out the names to protect the guilty, but the Jewish Community Center was a great, great place for Jewish kids. I wasn't there very much. I was only there 5.5 days a week. And the only reason that I wasn't there the other day and a half is because it was closed. It closed Friday afternoon for Shabbos and didn't open again until Saturday night. So all my contemporaries, any kid who was interested in sports or a place to play ping pong or to go to a dance or be involved in anything, went to the community center. This community center was working very, very well. And we had one of the great people, it was Max Rotman, who made that place someplace you wanted to be, because there were guys like him around who'd pat you on the back and give you a kick in the backside if you needed it, whatever it took. And it was a great, great place, but some problems came years later, and you know, they've gnawed in the back of my mind for years and years and years, that one of the synagogues wanted to have a fundraiser for their synagogue, and we had planned a dance for the kids at the community center. And lo and behold, we were told beforehand that we couldn't have the dance because the synagogue needed to have their New Year's party. They couldn't have it at their synagogue because it wasn't ready, so they're going to have it, and we were displaced. And there's a lot of us who were very active members in those days who are still angry to this day, 100 years later, about what happened then. We were literally kicked out of our second home, and I've never forgiven them. And there are others who I'm sure feel the same way. Oh, only one time, it'll never happen again. Lo and behold, it did happen again, because the synagogue still wasn't ready, so we were displaced a second time. But you can't take away from the place was very, very important to many of us. We had a good time there. It was a great, great place. Sure, it became, it was in the wrong place. You know, that we had all the people gravitated towards the West End, and it was a hard place to get to. But even being hard to get to was still a great meeting place, and where you had a chance to meet people, see people, and play ball, have a good time. It was some great memories there. I remember it very well.
There when I moved, but by then it seemed that very few people were there. But I could only imagine that it must have been a very, very warm and vital part of the community when it was used by people like you, who, as you say, were there 5 days, 6 days a week. Well,
there were the cross section of people. They were there from old to young. There were guys who played. God, I can go back and I can involve Wendy in it. Her father used to play handball down there. He was. You could not use the handball court. This one of the bad parts. Between X and Y o'clock, because your father and his cronies all used to play, and you couldn't come near the court then. That was reserved for them. Forget about it. You could be waiting there 2 hours for a chance. It wouldn't make one bit of difference. Between X and Y o'clock, you couldn't get in. and the rabbis from the Beth Jacob, and there was a fellow, I wish I could remember his name, who worked for the Hamilton Spectator, who was a great handball player. He was one of that group, and there's so many there. Now I want to remember names.
You can also buy food there, couldn't you?
Yeah, there was like a little restaurant there, coffee shop. Some very nice people ran that over the years, and it was a place you went. It was something that you could go to and enjoy. The center that we have now, it's not bad in some ways, but it couldn't hold a candle on its best day to what we had going for us at the Delaware. So we're